Hi there everyone, welcome to this week's video where we're going to talk about Leibniz and Emilie du Chatelet on knowledge and science. I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible because I've given you a lot of videos for this week. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's discuss Leibniz's meditation on knowledge, truth, and ideas. Here we're going to cover a lot of familiar territory, but in essence, Leibniz has 4 tiers to ideas or knowledge, right, that are distinguished in virtue of certain capacities with respect to that idea. So let's investigate this first tier. Can you say what your idea is, right? Is your idea minimally clear such that you can say what it is, right? If the answer is yes, right, you can say, that's my cat over there, right? Then you have a clear idea. By contrast, for example, if you're smelling something and you don't know what it is that you're smelling, right, then your idea is obscure. Okay, so that's tier 1. This should be familiar to us from Descartes. Tier 2 will also be familiar to us from Descartes. Tier 2, can you distinguish your idea from other ideas, right? If you can answer yes, then your idea is distinct. And if you can answer no, then your idea is indistinct, right? So can I differentiate my cat, for example, from all other cats? If yes, my idea is distinct. You, in the case of you, the listener, right, you cannot distinguish my cat from other cats, right? And hence you have an indistinct knowledge or idea of my cat, right? Once again, this is already in Descartes. We've talked about this like a bunch of times, right? So I'm going to assume that you basically get it up to this point. Tier 3 is also going to be familiar to us, this time from Spinoza. For your idea, can you explain all of the predicates of that idea? Can you explain everything about it and why it is the way that it is? If yes, then your idea is adequate. And if not, it is inadequate. So for example, I can't say how many hairs are on my cat, right? On her body, right? And so I can't explain everything about my cat. And so my idea about my cat is inadequate, right? By contrast, I can, for example, explain why triangles have all of the properties that triangles do. And so if I have knowledge like a geometer, then my idea of a triangle is adequate. Now, finally, the 4th tier is Leibniz's innovation. This is what makes Leibniz's epistemology distinct from Spinoza up to this point. The final tier is, can you understand all of those predicates simultaneously, right? This is the aspect that was not contained in Spinoza. If yes, then your idea is perfect, right? There's no way that your idea could get any better. And if not, it is symbolic. So to get a handle on this distinction, think about things that you can have an adequate idea of, right? But that nevertheless contain a hidden contradiction, right? Leibniz's favorite example is the largest number. So I can have an adequate idea of what it means to be the largest number. I have an adequate idea of what the word largest means, and I have an adequate idea of what number means as well, right? But my idea of a largest number is symbolic if I can't see that there is a contradiction between the idea of being a largest and the idea of being a number, right? It belongs to the essence that for any number you can state one larger number, at least, right? You can always add to any number, right? Hence, the idea of a largest number, which we previously understood adequately, right? We can still have a symbolic knowledge of that idea if we simply go about recounting the predicates one by one, and we don't see that there is a conflict or a tension between those predicates. Now let's go ahead and move on to a discussion of Emilie du Chatelet's Foundations of Physics. Emilie du Chatelet is a really fascinating figure in the history of philosophy. She produced a translation of Newton's physics that is basically still used to this day. It's sort of a crowning monumental achievement, not only because you needed the linguistic skills necessary to understand Newton's very difficult work, but also you needed to have a solid understanding of the physics involved, right? And Emilie du Chatelet's work is generally high regarded for her understanding of those questions. Du Chatelet is also interesting because she comes a little bit later than Leibniz. She's largely friendly to Newton, right? But thinks that Newtonian physics needs Leibnizian metaphysics, right? And basically, her point of view is that some questions in physics can only be resolved through metaphysics. And quite generally, she likes all of Leibniz's arguments, right? But what are topics in physics that we need metaphysics for, right? And she gives us 3 examples. Number 1, what are space and time? Leibniz and Newton famously disagreed on the nature of space and time. Newton thought of space and time as like an absolute container, right? Like space and time are a giant bag and the world is in it, right? And so space and time exist in the way that stuff in the universe exists. Leibniz, to the contrary, thought that space and time were simply orders of relation, right? So space doesn't describe an independently existing thing, but instead describes a kind of relationship that bodies have with one another. And time, similarly, is a relationship of temporal proximity. How you answer what space and time are, right, obviously has massive implications for your physical system, right? Because in your physical system, you're constantly appealing to the nature of space and time. And for du Chatelet, the only avenue that we have for a clarification of the nature of these entities doesn't come from experience, it instead comes from metaphysical principles. Another question relevant to physics that we investigated very slightly in our last video is there an atom, right? Atom means atomos, uncuttable, right? So can you ever reach something like the smallest possible particle, right? This is still a question that physics, and especially quantum physics, investigates to this day, right? We've gone well beyond what was previously our model for a scientific atom into subatomic particles and so on, right? But you really need a metaphysical picture to answer the question of whether there is any final constitutive component, right, where we identify the smallest possible thing. Generally speaking, Leibniz and du Chatelet are going to say no. There is no smallest particle of matter in the same way that there is no smallest number. Finally, you can ask the question, is matter a plenum? Right? To be a plenum means that there are no empty spaces, right? And so this is related to the other question, are there vacuums in nature? Leibniz thinks that he can demonstrate from the principle of the identity of indiscernibles and the principle of sufficient reason that there aren't, and du Chatelet largely agrees with him. Now, this is very complex material, and it would well warrant us spending far more time to investigate these questions. However, I want to leave you here because I've asked you to watch 3 videos for this week. In next week, we're going to investigate some of the most puzzling aspects of Leibniz's philosophy, namely his account of substance. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.